the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Greetings and welcome to this episode of AVNation TV's Connected. I'm your host, David Danto, and this is going to be a real riotous show in terms of the prep we've been doing. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fun. As you can hear, I still have a little bit of a cold coming back from Enterprise Connect 2019 as we record this. It's about a week after that. I have a more guests than I've ever had on the show, and hopefully we're going to have a good one and get a conversation. And let me let each of them introduce themselves. Let's start with Mr. Banting, because we're using last names because I've got more Tims. Let us know about your new role and where you are, and introduce yourself.
Hi, David. Thank you very much. My name's Tim Banting. I'm Principal Analyst at Ovum. I look at the workspace services, or I'm part of the workspace services team looking at UC and collaboration. Part of the Informa Tech umbrella, we deliver research, analysis, insights, events and exhibitions. So Enterprise Connect is actually part of the Informa Tech brand. So it's one of ours now. Really exciting.
Great to have you. Thank you very much. And Mr. Albright, why don't I let you go and introduce yourself, what you do?
Yes, sir. My name is Tim Albright. I run an organization, a media organization called AVNation that this podcast is hosted on. We cover the audiovisual industry, all sorts and facets of it, including commercial, digital signage, marketing, UC, command and control, education, and all points in between.
Terrific. Thank you, Tim. Mr. Dudley, Simon Dudley, introduce yourself, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, David. Yes, Simon Dudley, Logitech or Logicool when I'm in Japan. And I've just been given analyst relations to run, as well as sales enablement and evangelism and a whole bunch of other stuff at Logitech. So we're living in exciting times.
A good friend of mine, but a new guest for our show, Ms. Hershkowitz. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, David. Great to join you guys today. I'm Mitch Hershkowitz. I am the General Manager for Digital Workplace at Dimension Data. So I market and take to market the modern collaboration solutions that we both partner with some of the folks on this call, as well as bundle together as solutions that we offer consulting, professional services, managed services for.
Terrific. Thank you, Mitch. And everybody should know Mitch is having a couple of network problems today. That's why his audio is a little bit tinny, but we're going to take it because the content is better than the quality of the sound. Erwin Lazar, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Erwin Lazar, Vice President Service Director with a company called Nemertes Research. We spend our time going out and gathering information about how end user organizations are using emerging technologies. I've covered the collaboration space at Nemertes for about the last 12 years now.
Thank you, Aaron. And last but not least, David Maldo, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Thanks. My name is David Maldo. I'm the founder and CEO of Let's Do Video, where we cover business communications and team productivity.
Thank you, David. So we have two Davids and two Tims, but only one Simon, Mitch, and Erwin. So we kind of have to work on that for future webcasts. And I do want to address just for a moment to everybody something personal. As many of you have probably heard, I've changed roles in the industry. I'm now going to be doing a lot of strategy and research with the new branded Poly company. But the wonderful management there has said that they want me to maintain my relationship with AVNation TV and Sound and Communications and the IMCCA, so I'm going to do that. So you can absolutely count on the fact that I'm not going to be doing anything partisan, and I'm not going to be bringing up any names or logos or any of the other products that we're making that most of the people on this call are using. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I actually like this hat. They had a blue version too at Enterprise Connect. But anyway, so let's talk about Enterprise Connect. Most of us were there. We had a lot of things come up. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is, Andrew Davis, who moderated one of the panels that I was on, brought up the idea that, we didn't really think that AI was going to be a big part of the show when they were planning and suggesting panels. And as it turns out, AI was mentioned and brought up in almost every one of the sessions that I attended. So to the extent of using machine learning, and AI, what were your opinions of what came out at the show? And did you see that as one of the bigger themes that we're going to need to focus on? Guys, just step in and start talking, and we'll figure it out.
I'd like to. Oh, here we go. So I feel that AI doesn't stand for artificial intelligence. I feel it stands for artificially inflated. I think there's far too many people talking about it, and the other part of AI is actionable insights. I don't think we're getting any actionable insights as a result of artificial intelligence in the enterprise communication space. Maybe AI is being used to some extent, well, it is being used to a great extent in contact center and customer journey. with chatbots and agent assist. But I can't see anything in terms of real productivity benefit in the enterprise. I know on a number of keynote speeches we saw early parts of that. Microsoft didn't make the link with cognitive services underpinning Microsoft Teams' ability to do language translation or real-time captioning, etc. There was Cisco's keynote where they showed some things where it used facial recognition and counting the number of people in the room. But by and large, I don't really see having chatbots in a team collaboration session trying to work out, people's calendar and finding spots in their calendar as really being AI. So I think we're probably on the fringes at the moment, with perhaps two companies taking some great leads there.
I would agree. I would agree with Tim. I'll let you jump in a minute, Owen. It's interesting to me, like just as an example, Logitech and lots of other people, I think, are using AI in its broadest sense to do certain things now. So we do framing of people in calls. When you actually talk to a kind of a real artificial intelligence researcher and you say, oh, we're doing framing of people and that's AI, they're kind of laughing at you. It's like saying we do computing and we've got a TI-83 calculator. I mean, it's a useful tool, but the trouble with AI is I feel it's a bit like, well, the way my mother thinks about computers. When I say to her, well, what does cousin whatever do? And they say, oh, they're in computers. I said, well, what does that mean? Oh, they type on a computer. That isn't the same thing as being in computers, Mum. And I think artificial intelligence is such a broad term now. It can be something useful, but relatively small scale from an AI point of view, like framing people in a call. Or it can be something enormous, like being a chatbot and pretending you're a human being. And interesting enough, we're actually doing that for internal use as well. It's not a product we make. So I think it's such a broad topic. I think it's sort of almost meaningless at this point.
All right.
Yeah,
Any other thoughts?
Sure. I think it's one of those things where, like Tim said, you have to have AI in your marketing literature to be relevant right now. All the vendors are trying to stake out a competitive differentiation that we're doing AI. We've got something related to it. In our research going out and talking to enterprises, I think they are interested. They're not willing to spend money yet, and they may not be able to based on what's really available. The one thing that we found in our research that IT buyers, their ears really perk up at when we talk to them about AI is the real-time language translation. You've seen that now from a couple of the vendors, where if I'm speaking with somebody who speaks a different language from me, there's an AI engine that can do real-time translation and hopefully have a pretty decent shot of getting the translation right so that we can engage in a conversation. So I do think we are in the early days. Obviously, yeah, it's a trade show. You're going to see a lot of vendors trying to hype what they're doing, but I think there are some real value propositions that you're going to see flesh out over the next year or two.
Yep. I think part of it is we've reached a point where it's harder to find differentiators because video conferencing works and it's good. It used to be our differentiator was, if you use our video conferencing solution, your meeting will start on time. It'll actually work. It'll have high definition. The audio will be good. Now video conferencing, a lot of our cloud vendors have good video conferencing, so they need other differentiators. So they're looking for features like real-time transcription of voice, or the Cisco thing where it gives you a little LinkedIn summary of the people that you're talking to. Now, some of it might be just, hey, we got to stand out and be different, but it turns out these things I like them. They're cool. I don't think they're just doing them for marketing hype. I think they're useful and will help in meetings.
Well, David, I'm going to challenge that just for a second, and it also leads to our other topic in that, meetings just work now isn't really true unless you're in a siloed environment. If you happen to be, using just one cloud or one vendor or one participant and just their gear, and you want to make a meeting work, it's fine. But I heard in session after session on Enterprise Connect, end users are still coming back and saying the stuff is too hard. We want it to just work. It's not frictionless. And I think that's coming from the fact part of it is the lack of interoperability, but part of it is the lack of ability to walk into a room and just start your meeting if the meeting you happen to be starting isn't on the service that the enterprise has selected. So one of the things that I think AI will be able to do in the very near future is the idea that you can, if I handed you my iPhone, and unlocked it so you could look at my calendar, you saw on my calendar there was a Blue Jeans meeting invitation at 1 o'clock, and then there was a Zoom meeting invitation at 2 o'clock, and then there was a Teams invitation at 3 o'clock. You're smart enough to look at that and say, oh, well, for Blue Jeans, I have to do this thing, but for Zoom, I have to do this, and for Teams, I have to do that. That's what we could really use AI for in the collaboration spaces. Can you scrape that information so that I don't have to figure out where do I need a bridge, what's my PIN number, things like that. I think that we're on the cusp of needing that because a lot of people were still asking to make the meetings less frictionless, more frictionless, less friction. Do you guys agree with that?
Well, here's the thing, that right there is the definition of unified communications, right? That is the seamless part. That is the holy grail. That is something that AI, as well as facial recognition, also can play a part. Because here's the thing: if and I came from education 100 years ago, we were talking 15 years ago about using RFIDs and key cards to give to professors so when they walked into their classroom for that session, the system would start up. It was seamless. It was frictionless. This, that, and the other. Now the facial recognition has gotten to the point where if I walk into a room and Simon walks into a room and it's Simon's room, Simon's the one who scheduled that meeting, the system won't start up until he is physically in that room, and then the system should be able to access his calendar and say, okay, well, this is a Blue Jeans meeting or this is a Teams meeting, and then access the proper components, the proper connections, and start the system. That is unified communications, right?
Yeah, can I say something
and I agree,
here?
and I think that sorry, Sam.
So, no, Mitch, go.
I was just going to say, so I think that's the piece of the AI conversation that troubles me is part of us are talking about AI is making the technology better. And to your point, isn't that the value of unified communication? Shouldn't we be doing that? Whether we're using AI in the background as part of the architecture, that's fine. But that's not really the selling point. I think where Tim was going earlier around the cognitive conversation, that's really the AI I think is of value to the boardroom when we can start to take a look at actually making those meetings better, making the information coming from those meetings more valuable because it now has a way to work in the next meeting. So I've learned something that's profiles that have gained. There's an interaction. There's a way we like to work. All of that information being gathered, saved, knowledge base, whatever you like, and then used for future meetings or follow-ups or things like that. So I'm concerned a little bit that the AI is being used for the technology that we as integrators, as vendors, as manufacturers should be doing in the background to make it better, to make it more unified. But we're losing sight of that cognitive side, which is really why people are looking at AI to begin with is how do you help me do my job better?
Yeah, and I think to kind of wrap up, Dave, you hit on a great point, which is the disconnect. The vendors, they want to leverage AI to improve their products. Makes sense. If I'm Cisco, I want AI that only works in the Cisco environment, so I get you to buy the Cisco services. What we're hearing the enterprise user saying is that they want that power to be able to walk into a meeting room and say, I'm doing a Zoom meeting now, then a Blue Jeans meeting, then a GoTo, then a WebEx, then a Microsoft meeting, and how do I make that as easy as possible? And I haven't really seen anyone adopt it, attacking that from an AI perspective. I've talked to a number of the endpoint vendors that are looking at embedding capabilities into their control panels that would give the user the ability to click a button and say, okay, now you're going to join a Blue Jeans meeting, go ahead and enter your number and join. And they at least have the intelligence wired into the back end to know how to connect to that service.
Well,
can I just finish, okay. Dave, can I just finish and say, we talked about AI here, right? And let's be honest, using the words AI in everything we've said, and I agree with everything people have said here so far, all about these different applications, using the word AI as part of that conversation, whether it's facial recognition or framing or room booking or working out what app to use, using the word AI added nothing to the conversation. No one learned anything more about it. So what we really should talk about is what these applications achieve, not in theory what they are. It's a buzzword in the same way that 10 years ago the world was all about high definition. I'll tell you a funny story. I just had a new roof added to my house yesterday, and the chap who put the new roof on my house said to me, oh, it's a high definition roof. And I just stared at him and I thought, well, I'm not going to hit him because he's bigger than me. But it added nothing to the conversation. I would argue that AI as a turn of phrase isn't useful. The applications are the bit that matters.
It's a bit like WebRTC, isn't it? All about WebRTC, my word, how many sessions do we have on that topic at Enterprise Connect? What it really led to, as Simon was alluding to, is better experiences joining through a browser without having to download goodness knows how many applications as we all switch between these conference calls.
Okay, I'm going to get back to WebRTC because I think that's an important point of talking about that just for a second. But I definitely want to take off on Erwin's point for a second and talk a little bit about what we were going over with the concept of end users, corporate users, really want their organization to be able to join a meeting, whatever it is, because they've acknowledged that there are going to be multiple providers and they're trying to get rid of that friction. And many of the manufacturers have talked about, their product is going to work their way, and maybe they've created it interoperable, but you have to use their systems or their preferred products. Maybe haven't. What I heard at Enterprise Connect session after session after session was people coming out and saying one size does not fit all. Manufacturer, vendor, do not make me use your product if your product only works with your product. Give me the ability to be able to use all these various platforms and vendors. Stop trying to give me these one size fits all solutions, because that's not where we're going. And I haven't seen a lot of the manufacturers pick up that theme. Do you guys have any feelings about what you heard and what you saw, and whether or not the end users are finally going to get that nirvana around interop?
I have a story. It's actually from last year's event, but there was a panel where high-level execs from all of the cloud vendors were up there. There must have been 15 of them. And one hardware guy, Scott Wharton, Simon's boss, representing the hardware side of it, and all these cloud vendors. And I got up and I said, look, when we use our phone, I don't care if I'm calling Sprint or Verizon or AT&T, everyone has a phone number. All the companies agree they're going to understand each other's phone numbers, and they're going to work together. Why can't you do that with cloud? Whether I'm on Zoom or BlueJeans or Teams or Skype or whatever, I have my thing, my number, and I call you and I answer. You people sitting on this panel can do it. Right now, you can shake hands and agree to do it. And they all started explaining why it wouldn't work. And finally, Simon's boss, Scott, ended the conversation. He looked at me and goes, David, they're not going to do it. Give up the dream. They're not going to do it. And that's the reality.
I would argue, right, so I would argue 2 points. One, let's look at instant messenger as a widely available application that millions, billions of people use every day. There are applications, I think Trillium was one of them, that allowed you to be the kind of the one ring to rule them all, and you could run all your instant messengers from IRQ to Yahoo to Skype to not Skype, but all these others in it. And you know what? Almost zero people use it, because what they want is all the other file or all the other stuff that goes with using, whatever WeChat or Google Hangouts or whatever the other applications are. And what the users end up doing is just downloading the one that's useful to them. Now, is it perfect? No. But the other argument is that let's all go to a standard. Well, let's be honest, the video conferencing industry tried standards, whatever that meant, for 25 years. And I would argue that it was one of the reasons that held back the industry. Now, I've got no dog in this fight, right? At the end of the day, Logitech product works with whatever application that people want to use. But I would argue that this idea that we're heading towards a single app and some sort of nirvana, I just don't think it's realistic.
Well, Simon, I'm going to pick up on what you said just for a second, because standards are always fabulous in the first person. My standard is the right thing to use. Standards in the third person, their standards never work for anybody else, and that's the unfortunate situation. And Tim, you had started talking about WebRTC. We had WebRTC as this hype storm a few years ago that it was going to be the solution for everything, but then some people opted in, and some firms didn't opt in, and some firms wanted to use their version of WebRTC. Now it's coming around again, saying, oh, yeah, our standard is going to be WebRTC. We're giving up all this stuff. You know what? Until everybody's on a single standard and it works, it's not a standard. And I think WebRTC is still a hype storm around that. We've got a point now where everybody's kind of agreed to what it should be, but it still isn't fully implemented. We still have... Dave,
it gives you lowest common denominator, right? Mr. Maldo said, everyone has a phone number. Sure, but the phone is the worst possible experience. So if you want the lowest common denominator, not even the highest common, but the lowest common between all of them, then sure, you can have that. But who wants that?
Can I play devil's advocate for a second here? And to David Maldo's point, haven't we at least moved that bar? And think about it, because Simon used to work for a video conference system. Think back 15 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. None of them worked together. You could not get there from here. You could not connect a Tandberg to a Polycom system. It was not possible. Or if it was possible, it took a lot of hoop jumping. That bar has at least moved a little bit to where you can now connect. You can, one conference room system can be using a Poly system, and the other conference room can be using, a Cisco system. So we've at least moved the ball that far to where it is possible to have two separate, complete hardware systems. And what David's talking about a little bit is also the soft codec system. But we've at least moved the ball to where hardware can now at least connect to each other. Have we not?
You're right. Yeah,
So
you're
we
right,
have,
Tim.
but that's not the bit that matters. It's the can I do a Zoom call from my Teams environment? That's what I would argue.
I think it's even different. At least thinking about the room systems is that we David Maldo, you did the session on Thursday morning where you talked about software-based endpoints and the idea that you now have computing power in most of your conference rooms as you move to more of a software-based endpoint. So if I've got a computer in that room, but that computer only runs one vendor's client that is locked down to run, that's not really buying me anything. The ideal would be I walk in and that touchpad has Zoom and BlueJeans and GoTo and so on, and all of the different clients, and I just click a button and run that client.
Actually, that's a question for Simon. Simon, Logitech has a new tab. I know that it works with Skype, and I know that it works with, I think, Zoom and with BlueJeans. Do I have to buy one version of each, or can I walk into a room and switch between them? Is the tab, when I buy a tab, am I buying a Zoom tab, or am I buying
You're buying a tab.
Okay, so we are
a tab
getting
is
there.
a display. Now, what you can't do today, so we do it with, I won't make this an advert for us, but
But it is what we're talking about, a device that can do different things in one room.
Yeah, we do it with Google, Microsoft, and Zoom today. We'll do it with more later. It's a single device. You will need a different build for a room solution of each of those on the PC, but that's just a simple software build. You can run a different application.
David, if I were to stick on, my poly hat just for a second, and I'm going to put it on so you guys know what the difference is. We believe the market needs what you guys were just asking for. We believe the market needs a device that you can walk into the room, press a button, that you don't need a new build, that you don't need a new codec, that you didn't need to know that I'm on a Teams call, so I have to use PC compute versus I'm on somebody else, so I need a different build. We believe you want to walk in, press the button, and go, which is why we believe that some of these things shouldn't be running on compute, which has democratized the industry and lowered costs, and it's terrific. We believe these things should be running on chipsets, possibly Android chipsets, so you can walk in and have the menu that Erwin just specifically asked for. Now, is that in the market yet? No, but is that in our thinking? Absolutely. That's the direction we want to see. We want to provide a codec that works like a phone. So you pick it up and you call, and it doesn't matter what exchange or what interop or whatever else it is. You just pick it up and dial, and it works. That's what we're shooting for.
Well, tying everything all together, there's if you look at Microsoft Teams, for example, they team up with Pepsi, BlueJeans, and others to provide MCU and mixing in the cloud. Could you imagine if Microsoft said, we'll take anybody's conferencing client, we'll give you real-time captioning, we'll use all the cognitive capabilities of Azure? That'd be phenomenal. Just any device, any client, a conferencing service where you can have anyone to connect to without the added expense of having to go out to a third party to buy another service. It's a horrible mess at the moment, isn't it? I'm not sure who's got the right solution.
Is vendors in the space are still maintaining their proprietary capabilities. They're claiming that they have interoperability, but in order to have interoperability, you have to use this third-party service or have to use this specific set of tools. And they're doing that because they say, and legitimately, that if we don't do that, we're not going to maintain the quality of the calls on our system. Historically in the industry, if you think back to when telepresence with a big P came out from Cisco, that was their exact same thing, is we're not going to allow you to connect to some of these other systems because if you connect to these systems, it reduces the quality. Well, guess what? If you have a call with 18 people and 17 of them are on high quality systems and one is your CEO on a boat or on an airplane, you don't care what the connection quality is like. You want to hear what he has to say. You want that call to come in and connect. So, it's a market strategy. I understand it. I appreciate it. I still think the future of the industry is going to be simple systems on desktops and in rooms that you can go into, that some AI bot will say, oh, look, we're doing a Teams call now. You know what? In order to do a Teams call, we need to invoke PEXIP. We're going to do that in the background, or we need to invoke this other engine. We're going to do that for you. Here's your start button, go. It doesn't matter what your service is. That's what we should be providing as hardware and software to the industry.
Yeah,
Wow,
you
great.
got it. I'll bring it on.
All right.
I'm ready
We're
for
all
it.
in violent agreement. Yeah.
Yeah,
Everyone's nodding. Yeah.
I'm not going to say no to that.
Okay, so let me change the topic then. Let's talk about one of the other elephants in the room, gorillas in the room, whatever you want to call it. At Enterprise Connect 2017, which most of us, I'm sorry, 2018, which most of us were at, you couldn't spit without somebody talking about their team chat application. And I'm talking about persistent, ongoing chat. You had, Slack was on stage in their shorts, boxer shorts, talking about what a great company they were. You had Facebook up there talking about Teams. You had Microsoft. You had Cisco. You had every vendor talking about their team chat application. And other than Microsoft, who, by the way, had the best keynote at the show, in my opinion anyway, talking about what their product, which is called Teams, does in the persistent team chat space. So I'm separating the two. Other than that, nobody really even talked about it this year. That was my impression, that I think it was a fad. I still think it's a great tool when you have a small team. And David Maldo, you and I have talked about this multiple times. But am I correct in assuming that the fad piece of it just wasn't there this year, and that the hype storm?
Wow. Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was that it wasn't the
Fed
Fed was there this year, David. Because I took a different tack when I walked into the show. I felt like I was back at VoiceCon. There was platform aside, there was all the voice platform. I saw Fuse and I saw Ring Central and I saw 8x8, and it seemed like voice was back, and that was just the focus this year. It was almost as if Enterprise Connect had a new theme. So I'm not convinced that the fad is gone. You could almost say it's no longer needed to be on the main stage because everybody's using some form of team collaboration. That's one other way to debate that conversation. And I was looking at all these new voice providers, and some of them weren't so new. I shouldn't say it that way, but they were getting front stage and they were taking over that floor. And you actually had to walk back to see some of the endpoints, and you had to walk back to see some of the other providers. I don't know if I saw it the same way. I still think team collaboration is very relevant for the enterprise. Go ahead.
Well, Mitch, you used the term voice. Now, VoiceCon was telephony, and look at the vendors, the traditional telephony vendors that weren't there. Unify weren't there. Alcatel-Lucent Enterprises weren't there. There was Mitel there, and there are others. But I would almost feel that team collaboration is the new platform, and I sort of really feel that the battle lines have been drawn between, it's a platform's choice now, and team collaboration is about replatforming. The PBX is no longer the platform. It's not the platform for productivity, and it never really has been. And all of these cognitive and AI capabilities, you need the processing power from the cloud to be able to power all of this new technology and this new, these new ways of working. So I'd almost feel that I don't feel like it's. I feel like the platform has been decided. I don't really feel that it's about telephony anymore. However, one point to note is that all the team collaboration platforms are adding telephony features and functions to their products. Cisco with WebEx calling, for example, Microsoft Teams, adding capabilities that they had in Skype for Business, but they're sort of deprecating that or not putting any R&D in that, and they pin their colours to the wall with, the future is Teams. I feel that the platform is team collaboration, or whatever you want to call it, and it's not telephony anymore. I don't know.
I'd agree with you, Tim. I mean, I think what's happening is that, firstly, I find it funny that Microsoft for years have been telling the world, oh, we're not doing telephony. We're not doing telephony. And the thing that was amazing about that was that other people believed them when they said they weren't doing it, when they patently were, and they kind of pulled the covers off in the last 6 months or so, maybe a year, and said, oh, actually, we are doing telephony. But what's happening to me is that all these things are, whether it's video, whether it's persistent chat, whether it's file sharing, whether it's webinar technology, whether it's telephony, they're all applications as part of a bigger workflow. And they're not separate things anymore. So what everybody appears to be doing is trying to fill in the gaps to make certain that they have the full offering rather than we are just a single play. Zoom would be a great example, right? They've got a wildly successful video product, and oh look, they're now getting into the audio world. Not particularly surprising, but obviously a very clever move for them because they're looking at partners of theirs like Ring Central, who are probably doing very well in audio. What's interesting there is that people like Ring Central is a good example, I'm sure, are looking at the Zoom video platform and going, oh no, that's become our competitor. They now need to go and create their own. So it seems to me that everyone's filling in all the gaps because no one can have a flank that they can be attacked on.
Yeah, I think you nail it, Simon, in that when you think of the platform now, it's that unified communication as a service platform that includes telephony, meetings, video, and messaging. And all of the vendors have a team collaboration messaging client. They've mostly moved to making that the replacement for the soft phone. I think among the bigger vendors, certainly Cisco seems to have taken a little bit of a step back and said, hey, we've got, I don't know, 93 million endpoints on-prem that we aren't quite ready to tell them throw that out and move to WebEx Teams. So how do we integrate with it and deliver the WebEx Teams messaging into that environment? And saw similar messaging from Microsoft that we're going to allow the Microsoft Teams application to better integrate with that large installed base of Skype for Business. So I think the other part I thought that was really interesting was almost when you go back to 18 and 17, it was, we're going to go with one vendor. Which one are we going to pick? Will it be Cisco? Will it be Microsoft? Will it be Slack? This year was, we're going to have more than one vendor. And even talking to customers of different products, they would say, the idea that we're going to get rid of, say, Slack as an example and go all to Microsoft, that's not going to happen. So how do we make them play together? And you saw companies like Neo and Nextplane and I think there's same room from 8x8 are trying to figure out how do we build that federation between the different applications.
Yeah, you know what? Sorry, Tim, I just want to say one thing about Irwin. It's funny, I remember back in the early 1990s, and everyone then told us that Compaq, Novell NetWare, and WordPerfect were going to win. And one of them owned the operating system, and one owned the network, and one owned the word processor that everybody used. And what happened was that it was so obvious until someone changed the rules. So this sort of idea that we're all moving to a single nirvana in the future is ultimately nonsense. There's no nirvana. The success criteria keep changing. The players will keep changing. And personally, I'm really happy about that because it's a lot more interesting than simply marching to one perfect environment. Utopia is always, by its nature, unattainable.
Yeah, I mentioned in the lock note.
To answer this question about, I want to get back to the chat. Okay,
go ahead. I was going to say, I mentioned the lock note. It's a great time to be a buyer. This is no longer the Cisco versus Microsoft debate that seemed to dominate Enterprise Connect for so many years.
So back to the chat thing. Every booth I went to, we just mentioned a bunch of telephony vendors. Every one of them showed me their team chat application. All these companies, what you guys are saying is right. They want to say, oh, you use us for audio? Well, use us for video, use us for chat, use us for everything. We can add video. We'll buy a video company. We'll invent video. We'll, chat, video, audio, get it all from us. Whether they're a video company, an audio company, or a chat company, they're all trying to offer everything. But every one of them, chat now is team chat. There are exceptions. Jabber just got a gazillion more users in the last year for some reason. And that's a traditional UC, which is person-based, not project-based, team-based. But every booth I went to was showing me their team chat application. Maybe there wasn't as much discussion as hype because it is kind of accepted. But there was a whole track of sessions about team chat. So there's definitely a lot of buzz and a lot of interest. And it's not just Microsoft leading. It's every cloud vendor out there, although Microsoft is leading. I mean, they are pushing Teams so hard. Every partner is like, Teams integration, we have it. So you could say maybe they're not pushing the Teams in Teams. There's other aspects of Teams. There's traditional video or whatever. But I definitely think it didn't feel fad anymore. I agree with you there. It didn't feel like a fad hype discussion, but it was definitely still part of the discussion.
Okay. So I'll take your comments in that I might be a little bit off base in terms of how I perceived it, other than the fad thing you just talked about. But it is interesting listening to both of you talk, David and Irwin. Irwin, you're explaining how all the end users saying we're not going to pick one product anymore because one size doesn't fit all. And David, you're saying, well, the vendors are saying pick my product because it fits all of your needs. Clearly there's a disconnect.
That's a problem.
It's interesting, though, David, just to finish that, right? I read a statistic the other day, and it was written by an analyst, right? So, who knows if they're right or not. But some analysts were claiming...
Dude, you're in charge of analyst relations. You better not
Careful, Simon. Don't shoot yourself in the foot.
Not at all. But we all know it's a prediction, right? It's a prediction of the future, and we all know about those. Things are hard to predict, particularly about the future. Someone was claiming, or some analysts reckon, that within 2 years, by the end of 2020, 41% of US businesses above, I think, 50 people will be running Microsoft Teams. Now,
Wow.
whether that statistic is true or not, I don't know. But already it's the fastest growing product in Microsoft's history. They tout that publicly. It's growing like gangbusters. There's a lot of demand for it. Now, you could say it comes with Office 365, but that's always been Microsoft's model to use a Trojan horse to get it in. People need Office. They use Office 365. Teams comes with it in some form or fashion. So I think that this stuff's going to become very important because Microsoft and others are going to spend a lot of money making certain it's very important.
Okay, we'll let that be the last word on the team piece. And I'm going to ask all of you to take out your Olympic judging cards, from your 0 to perfect 10s here, purely as critics, without having any kind of commentary on the quality of the company or the product. But we're talking about the keynotes that happened this year. I'll start with I believe, as I said before, the Microsoft keynote was probably the best one there. It hit all the points that a good keynote should. It talked about the platform. It showed improvements working. It had a couple of reveals on stage of technology. And having said that they were the clear winner of the keynote this year, I'll add that one comment in that what the heck was going on with the fog machine at the beginning? That was a wacky choice for them to have them come on, because I heard comments like, "Well, look, there's the smoke. Where are the mirrors?" Or the rest of that. Cisco's keynote, while this was the first time Amy Chang was on the stage, it was a very solid performance. I heard a lot of people talk about the quality she was, from the company that Cisco had bought, that she had come from, and how that AI was working. I also heard a lot of people talk about it being slick, and the analysts had seen a lot of those presentations, a lot of those videos at prior events this year. And in fact, the demonstration that she showed on stage of facial recognition and the names underneath it was something that was actually shown at Enterprise Connect by Jens Meggers 2 years ago. So I was a little disappointed that there was nothing new and there wasn't a lot of substance underneath the surface. And then a lot of the other keynotes, in my mind, were interesting, but they didn't really hit the mark of that bellwether that Microsoft did, which is, here's our platform, here's what we think you should use, here's how it works, here are some cool new features. That's just kind of my take on the winners. I'd be very, very curious what you guys think were the best and worst aspects.
I'd love to go first with that one then, David. Yeah, I thought the theatrics it felt contrived, and I felt that Microsoft should have used that time, perhaps 10 minutes, to have a little bit more structure around it. There were so many features being thrown in there. There was, 2 years ago it was a year ago it was background blur. This time I can change the background, so I can be on a beach, or I can be, give the impression I'm on in my office. There was so much there. Intelligent proximity, so you can go up to a device and it knows who you are, and you can authenticate into a meeting, into a room system. That there was oodles of stuff there, and it's a lot to take on board, a lot for the audience to take away. Microsoft laid out their stall, their vision for intelligent communications 2 years ago. This was their sort of second birthday at Enterprise Connect. I really felt that this was Amy Chang's sort of first sort of big public event that she did at Enterprise Connect. She laid out the stall for cognitive communications. I felt that was very well received and very interesting. It really felt that I felt Amy was a little more natural. I felt Laurie's presentation was a little more contrived. Amy's was very focused on laying out the strategy. Laurie's was around, look at all these wonderful new features. And to be honest, those features are great. But I heard a lot of IT managers saying, oh, great, more change control, more stuff that I have to tell the users, it's coming, in a week's time, a month's time, more training that I have to deliver. So there's, there were two keynotes, very good. One more contrived, one more natural, one laying out a strategy, one showing you more and more features that are coming down the line. I give them both an 8 out of 10.
It's interesting, Tim, because we kind of perceived it almost the exact opposite. But anyone else thoughts?
I'll tell you one thing, just one thing to point out is that Amy Chang, it was the first Enterprise Connect presentation from Cisco where within the first 15 minutes there wasn't a new device being announced. She was talking about strategy and software. And then, conversely with Microsoft, within a few minutes after the smoke, here's a device. So it almost felt like the presentations had switched.
So I'll jump in with just two things that really struck me in the keynotes. First was Walmart's use of analytics for being able to tell people, hey, you should be using this application. This would make your life easier. All of your coworkers are using it. Or, I've noticed you've installed this application. We are paying for it and you're not using it. So go ahead and delete it and we can recover the license. I thought those are some really interesting analytical ones. The sneaky bit of news that really flew under the radar that I think as we talk to our large enterprise clients that is going to potentially really disrupt the industry was Amazon announcing a SIP trunking service, the Chime voice connector for organizations that are currently directly connected to AWS, and that's most of the large companies in the world now. You can now send your calls to Amazon, and they're going to give you a rate of that's likely to be significantly lower than what you're getting from a Verizon, an AT&T, CenturyLink, et cetera. Limited availability, limited set of features right now, no support for 911, for example, but that's something to watch. That's going to be interesting.
Goes back to what I said before. I said voice, you said telephony, right? We're talking about calling. It seems like voice over IP again. I had similar views, David, to you. I thought Microsoft did a really good job with their demo. And because there's no one size fits all, they all kind of went at it a little bit differently. I thought Microsoft, it was the full menu. And I forget who just said it, but, they showed a little bit too much, it seems, at times. All the fancy features with the blurring of the background, now bringing a green screen feature, they just show it a lot in a short time. I thought Amy was really there to rebrand herself, or rebrand Cisco and introduce herself, especially having Rowan on the stage prior to that. It was interesting to see that balance there, and I thought she did a really good job of showing where Cisco is actually going, and did a really good job of using the stage as an advertisement. Walmart was the one that was really interesting to me. I'm curious to see if maybe we'll see more of that at Enterprise Connect moving forward, showing how these large enterprises are transforming, how they're using the technologies. They were branding themselves as a technology company. I would personally, as both a consumer and as an integrator, like to see more of that on the stage, and maybe save the demos for breakouts and whisper suites.
Okay, good point. Anyone else?
Well, I'm going to give you guys kind of a different perspective because I did not attend Enterprise Connect. So from the person watching the press and watching the social media, my favorite, actually, to David's point, a little bit opposite of what Tim, I didn't get the contrivedness, Tim, from Lori Wright's presentation, simply because I wasn't there, right? So all we got was the information, and I thought the information coming out of Microsoft was incredibly, it was a step forward for them. And I think it was at least well reported. So we didn't get we got mention of the smoke, but there was no, it didn't seem, at least from the reporting that we saw from several people, that it was the presentation was effective. And the other one that piqued my interest, to Mitchell's point, is the fact that that Walmart is now positioning themselves as a technology company, right? This is a global leader in retail, who is seeing the opportunity and seeing the necessity to pivot themselves as a technology company when they have been, a brick and mortar retailer for over, 30, 40, 50 years. They're seeing that need, and they're seeing these tools as a way to do that.
Well, we had a subsequent conversation with Case Murphy at Walmart, and he was talking about their numbers of users for their intelligence workers, their desktop IT associates, professionals. The scale of what they do is off the charts. I don't think there's a company that can compete with needing to do it. And he's actually authoring an article for us for the next IT AV report, which I edit, which will be available in May, and will be available as a handout at Infocom. But they're working with a data lake to create a lot of this information. I didn't find the keynote as enthralling as apparently you guys did, because I'm really interested in keynotes being descriptive and saying, here's what you can do, and here's how we did it, and here's the results, and here's what worked, and here's what didn't. I found a lot of the other keynotes to simply be a conversation about, well, we're kind of generally doing these things, and we're kind of generally getting good features from them. Might have been interesting, but I don't really think that belongs in a keynote. That would probably be better in a case study session, in my opinion. So
you know what?
Go ahead, Tim.
Sorry, David. I was just going to say, to Microsoft's credit, though, that their pace of adding features and functionality is huge. The other thing I wanted to draw people's attention to was, of course, that Cisco WebEx calling, although it was announced and presented in the theater on the trade floor, WebEx calling didn't focus in the Cisco keynote. Amy did really speak very confidently about a company that she was, she got in through acquisition and became, she started leading Cisco as a result of that acquisition as GM of Cisco's collaboration business. So WebEx calling was interesting because that didn't focus. It's the PBX cloud-based calling that's going to be added into WebEx Teams. Big news, but didn't really focus on the keynote. It seemed like a missed opportunity.
I just want to reflect on what Tim just said about Microsoft giving them credit for adding features and developing. I've been playing with all the different Teams applications, and man, they're putting a lot of cool stuff in Microsoft Teams. I don't know if I like it all, or know how to use it all, or I'm happy with the workflow yet. I'm still, playing with and holding judgment, but there's a lot of cool stuff in there. I got to give them credit.
Okay, and I'll let some of you other gentlemen that were at Enterprise Connect talk about what I think was one of the biggest, most correctly held, exciting logo and name change reveals at the show. Most of the people who covered it have talked about, the launch of the Poly name combining Plantronics and Polycom. Rather than have me comment on that, do you guys want to just say a second about what where it was everywhere and what your perception of it was?
I think you took the opportunity given to you. Doing it the first day was really, really well thought out. The fact that you couldn't pass a bench without seeing Poly, having your event that evening. I think the marketing team deserves kudos for the way they rolled it out before anything got started. It was just prominent. And then it was the talk of the show. So then you couldn't miss an opportunity to talk about it. So whatever you think of the logo, whatever you think of the organizations, the marketing itself, I thought was just brilliant to do it the first day, and I was very, very impressed by the whole rollout.
It's the hats. I think definitely that was the thing for me. It was definitely as Mitchell said, it was a big moment in the event. It was something that whenever I was going to meet with somebody, that was generally the first thing they wanted to talk about. It's a bold move for the former Polycom Plantronics. Those are a lot of years of brand equity that kind of you're giving up as you move forward. So we'll see how it's received.
As I suppose a competitor, cooperator, whatever we are, we're a competitor. Let's be honest, at Logitech with Plantronics, Polycom.
I still love you, Simon. You know that. Don't worry.
I know, Dave. I know. I'll say two things. One, I think I personally quite like the name. Not that anyone was asking, but I quite like the name. I think you did a nice job there. I do agree with Erwin that it's somewhat surprising at some level. Plantronics had a great name for 50 years. Polycom had a great name for 30 years. They're companies with long histories. Those equities, those brands are worth a lot of money. So I think it was a brave move to change, and I think that was I think it was an interesting move. I quite like the name, and I do think that having Plantronics and Polycom as separate brands was never going to be a long-term viable model anyway. So you had to do something. We wish you all the best in it. Us being successful doesn't mean you're not, and you being successful doesn't mean we're not. Everyone can make money, so we're pleased with it. One thing I will say is they need slightly larger hats for you, Dave. That hat sits at a jaunty angle, but not necessarily well on your head.
Well, the hat actually works really well if I wasn't wearing the headset. It's the headset that's blocking it from going down.
It looks like a pork pie hat, Dave, but I will take one off you when you get the chance, because I would love to have a Poly hat.
More than happy to have a Poly hat sent out to you and all the other Poly swag that's coming on.
Just the hat, frankly. I don't need anything else.
I have to get the polo shirts made, on the black shirts that I can wear for conferences. The next conference we're going to, of course, being Infocom. So, we're right at the point where we've used up most of the time we have for this. Let me go around the horn and give everybody an opportunity to give a final word, and then let people know how to get in touch with you. And I'm going to do this in the order that it's written here on the Blue Jeans. Thank you for letting us use your platform, Blue Jeans. So, David Maldo, any final thoughts, and then how can people reach out to you if they want you?
Just appreciate being a part of this. This was a lot of fun. It was a great show, and I heard it was a successful show. People say, is it worth going? And vendors and users, analysts, everyone was saying this one was worth going to. You can find me at letsdovideo.com or on Twitter at Let's Do Video.
Thank you, Dave. And I agree with you. Aircraft, since he's taken over the show, he's really done a remarkable job making it a very inclusive event. It's still more an analyst-centric event than an end-user-centric event, but there are a lot of end users. It was a really terrific show to go to this year. So, Erwin, you're next on the list. Your final thoughts, how can people get you?
Yeah, I think one of the things we really didn't talk about that I spent a lot of time talking to folks about were the nitty gritty things. 911 was one of the most popular sessions that I attended. I got to moderate that one for about the fifth straight year. We did a couple of sessions on compliance and security and governance, especially around team messaging. So lots more than just the cool new bells and whistles and toys. Also, the launch of Workplace Connect, which is happening in September, which is now the sister show to Enterprise Connect, which focuses on the evolving workplace. And I got to attend the pre-lock note session that covered some of the details around that and everything from how do you improve collaboration in the open workspace, furniture, soundscaping, and so on. So look forward to that as well. You can get in touch with me at I am Lazar at Twitter is probably the best way, or Nemertes is NEMERTES.com.
Erwin, thank you. Good ideas. And yeah, the show does look interesting. Tim Banting, I'll go to you next because I know that you've talked to me about it as well. Do we have a location or a date yet for that new show coming up later this year?
We do, yeah. It's our umbrella company Informer's event. And as you rightly point out, it will be coming up in the fall in Dallas. It's going to be a mix of IT buying centers, HR buying centers, and facilities managers, because all three of those people are key stakeholders in sort of the AV world and conferencing and UC world. So it should be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to going to that event. It should be great. If you want to reach out to me at tbanting on Twitter, reach out to Tim Banting on LinkedIn or www.ovum.com.
Terrific, Tim. Thanks very much. Mitch, let's give you a shot. What are your thoughts?
Thanks, David. First, sorry about the network challenges. I got the wall, the camera, and the lighting right. Didn't check with my carrier, but I am on an open, unsecured network now, so I won't give you my email address because I might be spamming people later. M. Hershowitz is my Twitter handle, probably the best way to reach me. What I really enjoyed, and I'll just stop with Poly and Logitech out of respect, were the headsets, the endpoints, the user experience devices that I was able to see on the floor. We talked a little bit about Team Collab earlier. We talked whether you want to call it voice telephony or unified communications, but bringing it all together, the user experience, that was really a big focus I felt, and I really thought that was shown well on the floor. And to someone's point, the show was actually exciting to walk around again. It was kind of a lull the last couple of years, and I wasn't quite sure where it was headed. I felt like now I could bring the client there, I could walk around, really educate them on what's happening in the workplace, and I'm excited to hear what's going to happen at Workplace Connect as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Terrific. Mr. Dudley.
Thanks, Dave. As you know, many of you know, I couldn't make Enterprise Connect in person this year due to the birth of my son, which I think is the best possible excuse for not making a show, but I'm not planning on making
again for the wonderful event in your family's life.
Thank you. Yes, this is definitely it. We've got an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 5-week-old as of today. So we're pretty busy. So I didn't go to the show this year. I'll be at every other show. Funnily enough, Enterprise Connect should have been the most important show for me now because I've just taken over. As well as sales enablement, I've taken over analyst relations for Logitech. So that's kind of interesting, and we're going to look at what we do there. Best way to get hold of me is probably through LinkedIn. I am on Twitter, but Twitter's not my favorite, so LinkedIn is probably the best way of communicating with me. And I'm looking forward to the next one. I always enjoy the banter and what we learn on these events. It's great fun.
Yeah. Mr. Albright, I'll give you the last word before I close it out.
Well, thank you, sir, and thanks for including me. You can reach me on the Twitters at TD Tim David Albright or here at AVNation.
Terrific. Thanks very much. So I appreciate everybody joining. Of course, you can just Google me is the best thing to do, David Danto or David J. Danto. I'm all over the interwebs, so you have no problem reaching out to me. For the IMCCA, for AVNation TV, I'm Dave Danto. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Connected, and we will see you at the next trade show or on our next broadcast. Take care.